Good evening. I'm attorney Lawrence Berliner, and with me this evening is our co-host Jane Faherty from the Stamford Jewish Community Center JumpStart program. Tonight, we have a very special guest from the State Department of Education, Bryan Klimkiewicz. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I'm not going to try to spell it, however, who will be talking about the new IEP that's going to be rolled out starting in the 22-23 school year. We are continuing to present our Zoom webinars because we're part of a community of concerned parents and professionals, and we are still learning how to connect with one another as we're getting through these difficult times. We're seeing obviously light at the end of the COVID tunnel, but we're not out of that era yet. We've been moderating a series of webinars to address these unprecedented times. The needs to address the impact upon your child's special education journey couldn't be greater, and having the various guests we've had for now the past 2 years, it's hard to realize, Jane and I, we've been doing this for 2 years, including tonight's guests. We've gathered again tonight to address questions, frustration, and try to empower you for the road ahead. We have received many questions in advance of tonight's webinar that are far too many to answer in the allotted time. So we apologize in advance for not getting to the questions. The ones that will be addressed are the ones that are germane to tonight's topic, and that is the rollout of the new IEP. I just have Jane will introduce herself in a moment, but before we do that, I just want to have our disclaimer. This webinar is being recorded. The information provided during the webinar does not constitute specific legal advice to you or your child's circumstances, and should not be relied upon such. The webinar does not establish an attorney-client relationship with myself, attorney Lawrence Berliner, a professional relationship with Jane Faherty, or the JumpStart program. By signing up, you've agreed to receive information about future webinars and events from the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner, LLC, and the Stamford Jewish Community Center. Zoom, which is tonight's format, is a third-party provider. It's not an agent of, associated with the Law Office of Lawrence Berliner, Jane Faherty of the JumpStart program, and I might add the state of Connecticut as well. But if Bryan wants to address that, he's free to do so. We note that we have attendees from other states and in some cases, other countries. Our focus has always been on the state of Connecticut, unless we're dealing with a federal law that covers all 50 states and territories of the United States. But tonight we're focused entirely on the state of Connecticut with a new IEP format that's going to be rolled out during the 2022-23 school year. So you'll have to check your own state, your own local jurisdiction for additional information to see how any changes affect you, your child, your school district. So Jane, why don't you provide a little background and then we'll introduce Bryan and then get right into his topic, which should be very interesting, and I hope as exciting to hear as I have been doing a lot of background preparation for tonight's meeting. And I just want to point out, this is the first major change to the IEP since approximately 2006. So whether you're a parent, a school district, a related service provider, or somebody else involved with special education, this is going to be a sea change because we've become all too familiar with the existing IEP document and format. I believe there are some improvements to the document. I was just remarking to Bryan before, the font size has been shrinking over the years, and now it's back to a readable font size. That's a major improvement for me. I hope the rest of the document will be a major improvement for others. Since it's a new document, I'm sure there'll be hiccups and bumps in the road, but we'll work that out as we move forward. So Jane, why don't you jump in?
Thank you, Larry. It's lovely to be back again tonight. I can't believe it has been 2 years since we've been doing webinars in this format. It's flown by. So I oversee the program called JumpStart, located in the Stamford JCC, which is predominantly for 2 to 3-year-olds with developmental disabilities. However, in addition to that, I wear multiple hats, one of which is I advocate for children within the public school, not only transitioning from birth to 3, but also I have friends that I support and advocate now in elementary and middle school. I also am an educational consultant, and I work with the foundation to establish community partnerships for this community. And we have a Facebook page called JumpStars, where we offer free recreational as well as educational programs for parents and caregivers. We have some wonderful in-person events. If you're finding this transition to the new IEP challenging and you have anxiety, you're concerned about it, you can come and meet other parents, connect and get together, and also then decompress doing fun recreational activities. So it's been a very busy start to the year. I know families are very much looking forward to this webinar tonight, as are educators. And I've also been talking to other advocates who are keen to see how the transition rolls out. So thank you, Bryan, for coming along tonight and sharing your insight with us, as you have been obviously a leading figure in creating this new document and worked with a team to pull it all together. So thank you for sharing this with us tonight.
And just one housekeeping note, because I've seen a couple of items in the chat. This is being recorded, and the chat, with the information in the chat section is recorded. We would ask that you provide your questions in the Q&A format at the bottom of your computer screen. That is not recorded. The Q&A questions are not recorded. We ask that you keep your questions general. Somebody asked, can you provide the names and emails of the speaker? All of our contact information and linkage to other agencies like the U.S. Department of Education, the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, my office, and Jane are all in the chat feature. And we always get a question, can I get a copy of this webinar? The answer, if you registered, you will receive a copy of tonight's webinar afterwards. So Bryan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Larry also has a YouTube channel where you can watch this webinar and other webinars that we've done in the past as well.
That's an excellent point. Bryan is the bureau chief of the State Department of Education Bureau of Special Education. For the past 2 years in particular, all of us have been who've been tasked with reading his memos on the COVID-19, have finally have a chance to see what he looks like, meet him live and in person. And so we're excited that he is a live human being and we get to see him. The other part is this is a brand new era. We're talking about the future. We're not talking about dealing with mask mandates, COVID-19, vaccines, whatever. We're trying to roll out something that's brand new. And that's why I'm especially excited that Bryan is here tonight to just discuss something that's brand new and not the past. So without further ado, Bryan, the webinar format is yours.
The virtual floor. Well, Attorney Berliner and Attorney Faherty, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you tonight and our participants, whether they're live on camera with us or viewing at a later time. I'm so excited about this initiative. First of all, to our participants, I know this has been a challenging few years, and the special education process, even under ideal conditions, is challenging to understand and challenging to navigate. And with the mix of the pandemic and all that you mentioned that we've all been dealing with, I just want to thank you for your continued support of your students, your children, your young adults through this process. As Attorney Berliner mentioned, today we're talking about moving forward in the future. I do have a few slides to share with you, but I'm really interested to hear from you what your questions are, where your concerns are, and to provide specific information. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. Once I go through my slide deck, if there are issues that you would like me to go back to or dive in a little deeper, I'm very happy to do that, and whichever format works best for you all. So I'll start the slide deck. Wouldn't be a presentation without a PowerPoint, right? So today, a few slides just to mention, I am the division director at the State Department of Education. So within the Connecticut State Department of Education, it's been an honor and really a privilege to work at the State Department now for 5 years under the leadership of our current commissioner, Charlene Russell Tucker, and Deputy Commissioner Desi Nesmith. Throughout the pandemic, I've really understood and appreciated the collaborative efforts and being included in leadership and ensuring that students with disabilities have been a priority and have been, as you mentioned earlier, an effort to provide guidance throughout the past 2 years has been a primary focus for us all. A little bit about the IEP document. So this initiative actually started in my first year coming to the state, which I mentioned was just 5 years ago. Our goal was to create a template that would improve the quality of IEPs. So we're not looking at data entry or checking boxes or things like that. We really want to improve the quality of the output of that IEP document and that IEP program for students. And we very simply wanted to improve the document so it's easier to understand and easier for parents and practitioners to be able to utilize. It started with regional forums across the state. In my first year, I held 18 regional sessions across the state that was facilitated by CPAC, which is our Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, or our Parent Training and Information Center. Each state has one, and CPAC is our identified entity. And we also had a partnership with the RESC Alliance to help facilitate those sessions. And it was clear, I asked parents several questions, but one of the focused areas was around the IEP document itself. We also held student advisory groups, state advisory councils. We created stakeholder groups to ensure that all voices were heard. We surveyed our educators, and really there was common sort of agreement on what improvements could be made. So we drafted the IEP document. It was a culmination of, as I said, amazing input from a variety of individuals. One of the easiest and most simple changes is that the document moving forward as an output will be in portrait format rather than landscape. The current IEP, as you're probably aware, we refer to in pages. So page 4 and 5 are present levels, or page 7 is where our goals are located. Now we refer to the document, and will be in the future, to sections of the document. So that's a real important change for us. We removed the clutter, as Attorney Berliner mentioned. The font grew smaller and smaller over the years as more and more got added to the document. We pulled out any non-required areas of the IEP that are more data collection and put that information behind the system so that it doesn't clutter the program itself. The prior written notice is another important change, which is now currently page 2 of the IEP. You may already know that page 1, 2, and 3 of the IEP are not actually part of the IEP. They're just introductory documents. The prior written notice is required when the district refuses or proposes an action, but it is not required to be part of an IEP. So that was an effort that we made to ensure that that requirement was pulled out and will be located in a different section of our system. Finally, just real briefly, our work was designed to improve the flow of the document. So parent and student input would lead into a student's present levels of performance, both academically and in the functional areas, and lead right to the goals and objectives. There's a training that's called Education Benefit that Connecticut really has been a leader in, and working with some other states. It's a really wonderful professional development opportunity, learning opportunity for educators and parents. What that process looks at is a student's IEP over a 3-year period. So you can see continuity or lack of continuity as a student moves through grades. And it's a wonderful process, reflective process. And within that training, to look at a student's present levels of performance and then to find out how that relates to their goals, you have to flip through several pages. And so our effort was really to improve the flow of information in the document. I did want to share with you, this is a wonderful slide that shows our student input. We have a few different student structures in the state. We do have students that are members of our state advisory council, which is a legislative group of 37 individuals, half of whom are parents or individuals with disabilities. We also have through CERC, a student advisory council for students in grades 6 through 12. And CPAC actually supports a student advisory group that actually carries through much younger adults, older students, young adults, actually through the age of 26. So we were able to tap into those structures, and you can see the students kind of marking up the documents. This is too long, too cluttered. And we really were validated in our work when we saw the students' input aligned with ours. So that was a really exciting and impressive work that our students did. So that, as I said, that process started 5 years ago. We did a couple of years of revision. And before the pandemic hit, we made an agreement and a partnership with a vendor called Public Consulting Group. Public Consulting Group is familiar with Connecticut. They've done several statewide initiatives, most recently an initiative called ReadCon in the state of Connecticut. And what drew us to this partnership as well is PCG's experience in rolling out special education data systems in other states. So they have worked with 8 other states before in this statewide launch. And we are so pleased with the partnership that is in place and will be for the foreseeable future. So what is CTSED? So it stands for the Connecticut Special Education Data System. So as you heard earlier, the IEP document itself was designed as sort of the central piece and the central focus of the system, but the system is really a lot more than just the IEP module. So I won't read all of these pieces, but I know you'll have a copy of this PowerPoint. I have to mention a few important features of why we're doing this. One of the reasons is to reduce the burden on the local school district level for data reporting and data collection. So we have a system now called CDAC, which is a Special Education Data and Applications System. That will be obsolete after the launch of CTSEDS. So thereby reducing reporting requirements on the local level. We're required to report federal special education data to the Office of Special Education Programs each February. And there's a timeline of data beyond that. And with this system, we'll have the information that we need. Districts will still be involved and still input data into the system. But once it is in the system and certified, then we don't have to ask districts for it. We'll be able to access the information that we need in the system. That's very powerful. Another really great component of this system is that it has what's called a parent portal. So the parent portal is a way by which district can share information with the parent through a secure site, which would include any and all documents around consent or that are produced within the Section 504 IEP process and eventually the MTSS process as well. The system can translate any and all documents in the top 10 languages in the state, another really exciting and powerful feature. So we built in rules of completion, we built in process. As I mentioned a bit earlier in my opening, we didn't want to design a system that was just data entry, compliance, checking the right boxes. We really built in a process. and CTSED supports the process and supports the educators and parents in the tasks that are required as part of the special education process. Again, I can go back. I won't go through all of these bullet points, but you can see the various methods. The IEP is the central and was the primary reason for this build, but you can see all of the other modules that are part of this, which is very exciting. The unhighlighted bullets there mean that those launches are a little bit further into the future. For example, the MTSS, or which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, or SRBI, Scientifically Research-Based Interventions module, will not launch until July 1, 2023. So that's 1 year after our launch of all of the modules that you see there highlighted in yellow. Excuse me. Again, real high level timeline for you. We began building the system in 2020, just before the pandemic hit. We piloted the system this year with 20 school districts that just finished in March. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides. And then we do have launch that we've maintained that timeline for July 1, 2022. Within the PowerPoint, there's a link here that will take you directly to our new IEP website. There's information and resources there that are accessible, including frequently asked questions and some recorded videos to display the components of the system. Just to take 2 minutes to really thank our school districts that have been involved in the pilot. We had 20 districts with a small group of team involved in each district complete in sort of a case study format. What that means is the school districts maintain their current system while they were testing a sandbox, if you will, a test site for our new system that will launch on July 1. And our districts provided us really great information about user friendliness of the system. Did they get stuck in certain circumstances? Could there be additional in-system prompts and or tools that would allow the user to progress easily? So we are reviewing those themes and information so that we can have those improvements ready for launch in just a few short months away. Here's a list of the districts that participated, just in case you were interested. And I'd like to shift gears now and talk a little bit about training. So training is really important. As Attorney Berliner mentioned, this is a monumental change of a document that we've had that's been in place for quite a while. One of the things I do want to emphasize is there have not been changes to IDA requirements. So that's very important. We may have improved the flow, built-in process, built-in rules of completion to assist planning and placement teams, but there are no new requirements that aren't already in place this school year, as there have not been changes to the IDA. There have been some recent legislative changes in the state that are already built into our system. For example, a legislative change around secondary transition now for all students beginning the IEP that student turned 14. So training. We have such support around training. I have an amazing team at the Bureau of Special Education. I have the opportunity to work with amazing, bright, motivated educators that are committed to supporting special education across the state, but we need help. So we are doing sessions like this. We reached out to our partners at CERC. I have to thank CERC under the leadership of Ingrid Kennedy, the director, Steve Profit, have been supporting us in building our capacity around this training. I have to thank the RESC Alliance and all of the directors from each of our regional education centers that have been supporting and expanding our capacity. And again, I have to thank the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, who has been preparing for this for several years up to this point in time. There are two separate training areas. One is called IEP quality training. So this is not how to use the system. These are modules that really are the foundation of special education that take someone through birth to 3 process all the way through student exiting special education by either returning to general ed or through their 22nd birthday or acquiring their regular high school diploma. So this again was a collaborative effort that we're very proud of. I have a direct link here because there is a parent module that is a part of this that is public and available for all parents and even educators to access. And we do not require IEP quality training before launch on July 1 for our educators, but several have taken advantage of this training. All of our pilot districts receive this training. We are offering regional sessions now through the start of the next school year, but this training will be available for the next 5 years. We will be supporting this long-term in improving the quality. This training is for general educators, administrators, principals, and of course, special education teachers and related service personnel and parents, as I mentioned. So this is a nice visual of the different modules that are both a combination of recorded as well as live sessions. This slide here will take you directly to our parent module, which is available both in English and Spanish, and take you through that very nicely. And just a few slides left. So the second component of training is called our CTSEDS user navigation training, where we're training experts from each district to understand the navigation of the training and then serve as on-site support for their building-based colleagues. And that training is going to start in July and carry through before the start of the school year. So again, very exciting information. Our trainers are very excited. They are, that is not the only support that school districts have, but it's a very important piece. Of course, PCG as a vendor will have resources and materials to support the navigation training. But we get a question a lot about, what's the most effective way to learn and understand? And really the simple answer is to begin to use it. It's like anything else. If I know me personally, when I get an upgrade of my iPhone, I don't know how anything works until I start using it. I'm not reading a manual or anything else. We built the system the same way so that it could be intuitive. And really the best training is to enter into the system and to start using it. We built in a lot of internal supports. Having said that, there will be external supports and training information for our educators so that they're prepared. At this point in time, I will stop and just a couple of other points to mention. So as of July 1, the system goes live, and any students planning and placement team moving forward thereafter will be within the new system. So that's important to understand. Another question that we get or that we receive a lot on parent information calls is, what happens with the old IEP, current IEP, when the new system launches? So let me just take a second to answer that. That document is a legal document and live and is required to be implemented beyond July 1 until the student has a new IEP. So we've approached both current vendors that are in place in the state to assist districts in archiving IEPs and other important information so that it can be uploaded into the new system as a static document. So it's a slow rollout in a sense that we're not asking districts to take that old IEP and then transform it into the new format and new setting. As students have meetings, they will have a new IEP. So if your son or daughter has an annual review this May, that will be on the current IEP document. They may not have another planning and placement team meeting until May 2023. At that point in time, you would receive a new format for that output of that IEP. So I'm ready to answer any questions that may have come up or go back in further detail, and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks again for the opportunity to share this exciting information with you all.
Can you just clarify, Brian, that when you say that they're going to be using the new format, so
Yes.
when a child has related services, when a child has existing goals and objectives, that information is going to remain the same, but it's going to be presented in the new IEP format and document. It's not that you have to, as a parent, go back and address the needs of your child in order to get the related services for X number of minutes or sessions per week, correct?
That's right. The only thing I would say to clarify is that, so the services on your current IEP are recommended through the end of that IEP period.
Mm-hmm.
So in my example that I use, if your child's annual review was in May, and that student has services through next May, those services are required to be implemented straight through the school year. There's no need to do anything different from a parent's perspective. When that student has a new annual, the team looks at the IEP, updates present levels of performance, creates new goals and objectives. Maybe the services stay the same, maybe they increase, maybe they decrease, depending on the planning and placement team determination. And then the parent would receive the new IEP document there moving forward.
One of the questions we received, Brian, was, looking at the changes between the old and the new IEP form. And before tonight's webinar, you had shared a document that did the current IEP and the new IEP. Do you have that available? That was that yellow, green.
This one here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that available to the audience? Can we?
Absolutely, please share. And this is also posted on our website. It is part of our IEP quality training. And it's a very high level crosswalk, if you will. And as you can see along the left-hand side, we have the current IEP with the various pages. And then just again, some high-level information about the differences or the nuanced changes within the new template. You can see here about the translation in the top 10 languages, IEPs organized by sections, and so forth. We also have another document that is just getting ready to be released that actually includes screenshots of the documents. So it's this same content, but also includes pictures of the IEP. So we're very happy to share those resources with you to disseminate far and wide.
No, thank you, because with anything new, especially something major, especially something that's been in place for at least 15 years, change is going to be, it's a process. It'll be difficult as we're learning
Absolutely.
system, how to read the new IEP. One of the changes is a lot of the information is on each page, and you don't have to flip around the IEP. For example, the service hours, the special factors have been rearranged. Could you touch upon how the IEP document itself is going to have information on the same page, and you don't have to really flip, from page 4 to page 10 and then over to page 11 back to page 8?
Sure. Let me share my screen again and take you through the new IEP document.
And just one quick question, Brian. We've
Sure.
had this a couple of times. So if a parent themselves has a disability, for example, if they cannot read, whether it's because of visual reasons or because for literacy, is there a function that it can be auditory and it can read it to them? Or would it be that they would print out the document and have support from the district to navigate it in paper form?
That would be the latter, Jane. So as far as the readability, so we mentioned that the documents would be accessible in different languages. but speech to text technology and those types of things would probably need to be accessed or tapped into, either based on how the parent is accessing that information and or how the district is supporting that. We are looking into that with PCG though, around other types of accessibility improvements that can be made and built into the system.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you. So Attorney Berliner, so this is the new template, which is also available on our website. One thing I want to mention is that the document is dynamic. In other words, it can expand and contrast depending on the decisions that the PPT team makes. So this is a real nice feature. So this is the first section of the IEP. One of the things that we heard in the parent regional sessions that we held was when there's an IEP amendment, sometimes it's difficult to understand or find where that amendment takes place. We know there's like a tiny little space in font, as you mentioned, on the current document. This is a real nice feature where in the beginning section of the IEP, if the IEP is amended, meaning there isn't a planning and placement team meeting, but an agreement to make a change between the parent and the district, that's articulated here with the section and the change highlighted here. So real nice feature. You mentioned special considerations. We brought the special considerations to the forefront of the document because teams really need to be answering these questions before they're designing present levels of performance or goals and objectives. If, for example, a student requires a behavior intervention plan or the student has goals and objectives, the system's dynamic in that the behavior intervention plan can be uploaded right in this section. If a student is deaf or hard of hearing and requires a language and communication plan, it will populate right in the system, and it is a required document to be looked at on an annual basis. Those are all really important improvements to the system. Going down to present levels of performance, as you mentioned, flipping between pages, you can see here that parent and student input is the first area under academic achievement. And as I said before, that nothing has changed. There's still requirements for present levels, the strengths of a student, where are the concerns and needs and impact of the disability. But you can see the flow here now leads right into the annual goal and objectives that's tied to standards. So that's a really nice improvement, we believe. And sorry to make you dizzy here, but I did want to scroll down. As I mentioned, it's a dynamic document. So if a student's not of transition age, those pages wouldn't be printing out blank or anything like that. It is dynamic. And I wanted to get to the related services. This is very similar to our current document in that it is a grid that's pretty familiar to us. So I think parents will not have trouble reading or understanding the nuanced differences here. We did have some changes in instructional site codes to simplify that between general education and a resource room or related service area or a student in the community setting. This is another difference than our current document that you can see around supplementary aids and services for a student. The accommodations are listed here with the areas, along with modification, assistive technology, and any required adult support that the student would need. Again, if a student doesn't require assistive technology, again, that section would condense and wouldn't print out blank. So those are some of the differences that you can see. I'm happy to, again, answer more questions or speak a little bit more in detail about any aspect of the new document.
We had a couple of questions on the parent portal, which is a new feature. What would be in that parent portal?
So the parent portal is a secure site within the system, and the school district has the ability to send information to the parent within the system. So if let's take an example of a planning and placement team meeting notice. When that is finalized and completed, it can be sent to a parent in the portal. When a document is sent to a parent, the parent receives an email and a text with a link. When that link is clicked on, the parent would receive a code to be able to access the system directly and then receive that information. Let's use the example of a consent for an evaluation. If the parent is required to sign consent for any type of evaluation or provision of special education service, that can be actually done electronically within the system and shared with the parent. Each time the information is shared, the parent would receive that one-time access link and code to be able to access their student's information.
If a student has, say, an individual health care plan, it's not an IEP document itself, but it's part of the student's program. Let's say they have a food allergy or they have medication to be administered during the school day. Would that be part and parcel of the parent portal, or is that something that exists outside the system?
Yeah, there's nothing that's part of the parent portal. It's what's sent to the district. So you can think of it like an inbox, right? It's a space that will build up like a file drawer for parents of their student. So individual health plans are not built within the system, but for example, in our section 504 module, districts can identify whether or not a student has an individualized health plan, and they can actually upload that health plan. Once a document's uploaded into the system as a static document, it can be sent.
So one of the questions here is there anything that isn't accessible to the parent on the portal that is visible to the district?
Sure. Yeah, the working space of the system itself. So there are features and components of the system that the district's working on to prepare those documents to be able to share with the parent. So if you think of it as if you go into the school there's hard copies of your students' records, that is something accessible and available within the system for the parents. If it's not a school record, then it's not visible or part of that parent portal. So it's a way for the district to share information to the parent. We are training the school district on how to navigate the system to produce those documents. So I hope that answers the question.
One thing I noticed, and I see that somebody had asked the same question, on the IEP goal, there's a reference to the Common Core standards. Is that new, or it was always there, but we didn't know that?
So IEPs, there has always been requirements to ensure that goals were aligned with standards. So what we did in the system was we aligned our common and built in our Common Core standards for math, reading, and early childhood development standards, our ILDs. And when goals and objectives in those areas are created, there's an alignment to that grade level standard. So we put that process in place. That's sort of the large umbrella over the goals and objectives that are written. So it's always been a requirement, but in the system, we've built and developed a way to have that displayed in a nice way for both educators and parents.
What do you think is the biggest advantage to this new format for both parent and educators?
I think it's the very simple that it's going to be easier to read and understand. I mean, that was our goal. It still has complex information. We try to avoid, we heard from students and parents and educators alike, to try to avoid acronyms wherever we can, to try to put information in terms that are understandable. But I feel like the biggest improvement is the readability and the flow of the document.
So in terms of, we did have a question, how to read and interpret the IEP, and I guess the answer is you would continue to read and interpret it in the same way you have the old documents, but this one should be easier to read and to interpret.
I think that's exactly well put. Yeah, I would agree with that.
We have a couple of questions about accommodations, in the sense that how, if a parent can't read the IEP, I think Jane touched upon this earlier, or maybe a parent has, say, a learning disability, a visual
Mhm.
impairment. Unless I'm mistaken, this document doesn't relieve the local school districts of their obligations to provide methods to make their school records accessible to parents. This is, part of this is, I mean, school districts are covered by Section 504 in the American Disabilities Act, just like the State Department of Education. So if who has the responsibility to make the IEP accessible? You, meaning you, the state, Department of Education, or does the local district have a corresponding responsibility to make the document accessible if a parent, say, has a learning disability, a language barrier, say beyond the 10 languages that you mentioned that are translatable, or they have a visual or hearing impairment, themselves, not just their child.
Yeah, we would advise parents to continue to work with their school districts on that accessibility piece. We know a system is not going to resolve or solve all of our issues and challenges, although it's a significant improvement for where we are now. School districts are required to ensure that parents are meaningful participants in the planning and placement team process. So that responsibility continues, and accessibility is a large part of that.
So we had a question here saying, how could you find items that have been removed or relocated? And are the names or the headers of the sections the same, or have they been changed?
Yeah, so the sections are all the same. So there haven't been any sections that have been removed or sections that have been added. But as I said, there's some nuanced changes. So you could take your current IEP and rewrite it into the current format. We're not asking districts to do that, an exercise in a clerical task like that, but parents will find consistency. It's just a different flow. One thing though that is, as I mentioned, there are some nuanced differences, and I can share one with you right now. It's called indirect services. So we have special education and related services. And then there's the supplementary aids and services when you talk about accommodations, modifications, assistive technology. Right now on the bottom of page 8 is where the school district would document, are there supports necessary for school personnel? So these are services that are not direct to the student, but important for the student's access, meaning staff training, staff support in the classroom, and so forth. So we put this structure in that is similarly structured to the related services and special education grid for any school personnel-based indirect service support. So if you went to go look for on your current IEP, you wouldn't find something that says indirect services, but it is located, or would be if necessary, on the bottom of page 8 of the IEP. Another difference here you can see in transportation. So transportation is included on page 11 of the current IEP, but we've built it out in a little more detail so that parents and educators can really articulate, why does the student require specialized transportation? Is it supports on the vehicle that are needed? Is it some type of specialized equipment or a type of a vehicle requirement? So we really feel like this information is more practical, more useful than what's sort of squished in on page 11. Again, I don't mean to be disparaging of the current IEP. It's a very good document. It's legally sound. Over the years, more has been added as things have changed. We reviewed 50 IEPs from 50 other states, just about, and really our document was excellent compared to other states. But as I mentioned, we do think that this is an even better improvement. And so, there are some things that parents will have to get used to and say, oh, well, where is that information? But I think it will be easier. And I would just recommend focusing on reading the new IEP rather than looking at the old and trying to, compare the two moving forward. It's taking from this point and moving on.
So one question we were just asked, and I'm not sure if you covered this earlier, but the prior written notice, where does that appear? Or how can a parent access that?
The parent will access a prior written notice when it's required. So when they receive the IEP, either in person, because in the system, the documents can be printed out and handed in person, they can be mailed to the parent, they can be sent via email in a secure email, they can be sent in the parent portal. There's lots of different options. If the district proposes or refuses an action then a prior written notice would be sent. There are some circumstances where a prior written notice is required when you don't have a planning and placement team meeting, but most often it's combined with that IEP and the change that was made. The 4 areas of prior written notice that are required is if there's an identification, either an initial identification or a change, an evaluation that is to take place, and changes to the IEP itself, so changes to FAPE or the environment. So all of those requirements for prior written notice are the same. We've put them in a document that's, again, easier to understand, but the district's required to complete a prior written notice as part of the IEP, and it will be sent simultaneously with the IEP, but not a page in the IEP, if you will.
One question we received: with the current IEP, if a parent disagrees with the IEP or it's inaccurate or incomplete, they send a letter or an email saying, these are my comments on the IEP. Is there any change to that process? Is that done electronically? Are the parents' disagreement or comments recorded somewhere else once they receive the IEP? In other words, it's to say in draft form, and once they see the final document, it's not what they agreed to, or their comments or parent input is incomplete or inaccurate.
Same process now. So there's no change in that process. We would, advise parents to work with their teams, work with their case managers. If there's information that appears to be missing or inaccurate, we do know that the system is designed to improve the quality and improve areas of compliance for the IEP. So we've built in mechanisms to ensure that requirements are addressed. But as you said, Attorney Berliner, if there's information, for example, in the parent input and or student input, or information that they feel is not included when was agreed upon, they should utilize the same methods they're using now to contact the district.
So a question from a parent for parents that are not tech savvy or comfortable with technology: how user-friendly is this piece of technology?
Extremely. We to the point where each district will receive a one-page infographic to share with parents on how to access the system. It is very intuitive, direct link. You don't have to remember a username or forget your passwords like I do all the time and then have to go back and get an email to reset. It's a direct link and an access code. And it's not only when you receive documents, a parent can save that link, for example, on their desktop or on their phone, and use that link again at any point in time to go back in and view the records that have been sent to the parent portal.
That's very helpful. You'll forget our passwords for everything, so that's good to know.
Now, for the educators, there definitely is a learning curve, right? Because it's new for them. It's a new vehicle, to use a term for the process. They're used to their current system, whether they've had that in place for 1-2 years or the last 15 years. So adult change is hard in that sense, in how to navigate the system, which is where a lot of our training efforts are going to ensure usability. But it will be challenging for our educators to learn something new, especially given the context of course, all of the pressures of the last 2 years. And I want to thank our educators in advance for supporting this change. We've heard from our pilot districts. We've heard from our teachers. There's a lot of, there has been a lot of, for lack of a better word, impact on our social emotional well-being for students, for adults, and what we've experienced over the last couple of years. So we really are being empathetic and responsive and putting a lot of structures in place for our educators to support this change.
Yeah, one question, I'm assuming it's from a teacher, is this: will this take more time for teachers? Is the question.
That's a great question, and we do get that a lot. And what I would say is this: the more you use the system, the easier it gets and the more time you cut down. So the first time you go in, you may be uncertain about what to do next in the process. That's going to naturally take more time. So we do expect the first IEP that teachers write will take longer than what they're doing now. The next time they go in will be shorter and shorter again. As I said, the most effective training is using the system, because then you become familiar with it. If we train teachers in July and they don't have a meeting until May, they're going to forget what they were taught, and the best way is to just learn. So we did hear that from our pilot districts too, is that this is going to take longer to do this, and that is true initially, but over time that will everyone will find their rhythm, and we're going to listen to our districts and our parents and make improvements as necessary.
Will it impact the timeline for evaluations and the implementation of an IEP?
No, those requirements remain in place. The initial evaluation timelines, reevaluation timelines are all in place. So that, and annual reviews and are all requirements that will continue. We do ask teams and to have grace with your teams as they're learning something new, and understanding that it may take longer than it has before, but those federal and state required timelines do remain.
We had a couple of questions about parent training, and I'm going to
Sure.
sort of make it several parts. Where is the training available for parents? Is it from the CPAC, the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, the Department of Education, local district, some other source? And I know you gave that IEP training.org was one resource. And then for a parent who may not be familiar with the verbiage, the acronyms, is there some way parents can learn that an IEP is an individual education plan, or a RESC is the Regional Education Service Center, or any of the other acronyms that many of us are familiar with, but because we deal with it every day. But if you're not, or you're new to the whole process, you're learning a whole new set of terms and acronyms.
Yes, and I apologize because I probably said my share of acronyms this evening as well. But so in the PowerPoint, this is a really great resource here. It's a parent module, and it takes a parent through the entire special education process. So that's a publicly available link to watch on your own time and to go through, and it's an adaptive document. There's questions that you need to answer as you're going through. A sort of an online course with a small c, if you will. And you're correct that CPAC also provides training, and they've piloted a few trainings now, but the training is really going to ramp up in September. Again, once parents start to receive the new document and have questions, but they will be offering those throughout the spring. And, as we roll out information to districts, we do so simultaneously for parents. Another resource that I would recommend is the Parent Guide to Special Education. Nothing has changed in special education. So that is still a great document, and it covers all, parents' rights and information about the special education process. Those are all available and accessible on our website, and you have a resource here for a training module as well.
So probably what's advisable is for parents, if they have the time, and I know time is precious and limited for a lot of people, but if they have the time, to start becoming comfortable and familiar with the training resources now. So by the time September comes around, you're less anxious about what the new document might look like and how the information might be presented to you. So to really start taking some time to tap in and explore 10 minutes, 5 minutes a week, just really get comfortable with it before September rolls around.
It's great advice.
One of your last remarks, Brian, dovetailed with one of the questions. How does the IEP, this new IEP format, affect the procedural safeguards, if at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's good, nice and short.
That's what I thought you would say. Well, we're getting close to our appointed hour to adjourn, and we've tried to get to as many questions as we possibly can. There are a couple that I'll just gratuitously take off the questions. Does an IEP follow a child through their schooling? The answer is yes, as long as they're eligible for special education. They'll have an IEP through age 22 or sooner if they graduate sooner with a regular high school diploma, or they don't no longer need special education and they're exited. So that's one that we can address. Does the new IEP change how the goals and objectives are going to be implemented?
Not implemented. It does not change the implementation of the IEP, but in the system, we have a template to ensure that goals and objectives are measurable.
Okay. And the final question, this is probably more for me. Where are the regulations located? Well, we have a set of federal regulations that are located in Title 34 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 300. Those are the federal regulations. And then we have a set of state regulations that are available through the Secretary of State's website in Connecticut. ct.gov is the state website. All the state regulations are posted on the Secretary of State's website. And the Department of Education regulations for special education are 10-76A-1 in sequence. They go from A to, I think, H or G. So there's a whole set of state regulations that are available. I believe they're available on the State Department of Education website, but I know they're definitely available on the Secretary of State's website here in Connecticut. So with that, I want to thank Bryan for his time this evening. I know he's been doing a lot of these past his, if there is a normal quitting time for working for the state of Connecticut. I never had one when I worked for the state. We had a 35, later on a 40-hour work week, but that's all I got paid for, but it was never a 35 or 40-hour work week. So I don't know what it is now, but I've been out of state service for quite some time. We will continue our conversations throughout the year, keeping a watchful eye on new special education issues. Bryan, I know, just issued a memo on vocational high schools, for example. So there's a lot of information coming out from the State Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education. Our next Zoom webinar will be Wednesday, April 20th at 7 p.m. Our special guest will be Dr. Emily Cashman, a licensed clinical psychologist, and Laura Noonan, an educational therapist at Freudemann and Billings, both of Westport, Connecticut. And they'll be talking about taking ownership of students' learning challenges, exploring solutions, psychological assessments, and educational therapy, which is their area of expertise as practitioners. And that'll include psychological assessments, educational therapy, a data-driven intervention, building a team-based approach for community supports, and ultimately developing a student's ownership and self-determination. Because what we're all trying to do is empower our children to become the next generation of young adults to take their rightful place in society, that we provide them with a proper regular ed or general education, special education, and we have them ready to launch after high school or age 22, whichever happens first. And I know Bryan and his team and a lot of educators around the state take those words to heart, as the parents do. And these past 2+ years have been quite difficult. So I hope we'll get past this pandemic and get back to some semblance of normalcy. So with that, I leave it to Jane and Bryan to give some concluding remarks. And I want to thank everybody who's remained with us throughout the evening for giving us your time and attention.
I just want to thank Bryan for coming along tonight and sharing this information. It's been invaluable. And just to acknowledge that everybody I know has concerns and trepidation about change. But what is wonderful is Bryan has noted it is a new document, but if you have major concerns or observations, share them with the department and Bryan and his team. So if things have been overlooked, they can make tweaks along the way. It's not a concrete document. I think the nice thing is you can see that it's intuitive and it's reactive, and it can move along with you and your child. Therefore, they can tweak it along the way, especially if there's a consensus of what might need to be changed going forward. So I think it's great that Bryan is here with his team. He's made himself available tonight and on many other webinars. So if you want additional information, I'm sure he's got other sessions he's rolling out. But he's been very responsive to us answering these questions. So if you still have concerns, reach out to him and his colleagues and your school and your district, and they should be able to walk you through the process as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I, again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight and to answer questions. I know our participants, as we've said, are so busy and it's hard to find any time extra, but we will be providing formal opportunities for feedback during the next school year. So thank you for stating that, Jane. We do want parents' feedback, and we do have opportunities to make improvements. We never settle in Connecticut. That's what I love about working here, is that we all want to do what's best for our students and work continuously to improve our systems. So we celebrate quickly and move forward. We have a lot of challenges that we know in place, but really great people that are working together collaboratively is how we're going to make improvements. And our goal is to improve outcomes for students with disabilities across the state. That's a common goal for whether you're a parent, an educator, a parent attorney, board attorney. We're all in this together, and we will make progress together. So thank you again. If we want to do another session, closer or after implementation, I'm very happy to do that. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And lastly, I want to also express my deep appreciation and thanks to my daughter, Rachel, who without all of her yeoman work, behind the scenes work, these webinars would not happen. A lot of work goes into the webinars behind the scenes, and she's the person responsible. So I just wanted to give a shout out. Happens to be my own daughter, but I appreciate all the work that she does. So I want to thank you. Stay safe, healthy. And for those who are joining us next month, we'll see you, as they say, on the radio, or see you on the webinar. Thank you.